We like to imagine we've mapped every inch of this planet, that with all our satellites and GPS technology, there are no more secrets left to uncover. But the truth is, the ground beneath your feet is a history book we've barely opened. Entire empires, thousands of years of human life, just swallowed up. Some are hidden under the deep ocean, others buried beneath a mountain of volcanic ash. Today, we're going to step into the impossible. We're going to explore 9 incredible, lost cities that were found in the very last places anyone expected to look. Now let's start with a place that almost every child in the world knows about, but for nearly 2,000 years, almost no adult believed actually existed. Troy. If you've ever read Homer's Iliad or seen the Hollywood movies, you know the drill. The beautiful Helen, the clever Odysseus, the invincible Achilles, and of course that giant wooden horse. For centuries, scholars, historians, and world leaders treated Troy like Atlantis or Middle-earth. It was a beautiful myth, a legendary backdrop for a poem about gods and heroes, but it wasn't real. People thought, sure, it's a great story, but you can't find a city that only lives in a poet's imagination. Enter Heinrich Schliemann. Now, Schliemann wasn't a trained archaeologist. He was a wealthy German businessman with a massive ego and an even bigger obsession. He believed Homer wasn't just a poet, he was a mapmaker. In the 1870s, while the rest of the academic world laughed at him, Schliemann took his copy of the Iliad to a dusty mound in northwest Turkey called Hisarlik. He didn't just start digging, he started blasting. Using dynamite, which by the way is a terrible way to do archaeology, he ripped through layers of earth. And then he hit something. Gold. Thousands of pieces of gold jewelry, diadems, and cups. He called it Priam's treasure. He had found it. He had found Troy. But here's where the unexpected part gets even deeper. As real scientists took over the site, they realized Schliemann's discovery was much more complex than a single city. They found that Troy wasn't just one place, it was a layer cake of civilizations. There are actually 9 different cities built right on top of each other, spanning over 3,000 years of history. When you stand at the ruins of Troy today, you aren't looking at one moment in time. You're looking at Troy once, a small Bronze Age settlement, all the way up to Troy Ein, a Roman city visited by emperors like Augustus. The biggest surprise? The Troy that Schliemann thought was the city of the Trojan War, Troy II, was actually way too old. It existed 1,000 years before the legend. The real Troy of the war was likely Troy VI or Cephanae. What makes Troy so powerful is the insight it gives us into human persistence. This city was destroyed by earthquakes, leveled by fires, and wiped out by bloody wars. Yet, for 3 millennia, people kept coming back to this exact spot to rebuild. Why? Because it sat at the gateway between the East and the West, controlling the trade routes of the Dardanelles. It was the Manhattan of the ancient world. Today, when you walk through the remains of those massive stone walls, the same walls that might have held back a Greek army for 10 long years, you realize that legends aren't always just stories. Sometimes, they are memories buried under 30 feet of dirt, just waiting for someone stubborn enough to start digging. If Troy was a city found through a poem, our second stop was found by accident. Under 20 feet of solid ash and pumice, we're talking about Pompeii. Imagine it's August 79 AD. Pompeii is a thriving, sun-drenched Roman resort town. People are shouting in the marketplace, children are playing, and the smell of fresh bread is wafting from the bakeries. Dominating the skyline is Mount Vesuvius, a mountain the locals thought was just a peaceful hill. They didn't even have a word for volcano back then. But in just 24 hours, everything changed. Vesuvius erupted with the force of 100,000 atomic bombs. A terrifying cloud of superheated gas and ash raced down the mountain at hundreds of miles per hour. It didn't just kill the people of Pompeii, it buried them exactly where they stood. For 1,500 years, Pompeii vanished from the face of the earth. Local legends spoke of a civitas, or the city, buried somewhere in the fields of southern Italy, but nobody knew where. That was until 1592, when an architect named Domenico Fontana was digging a canal to divert water and hit a wall. He found inscriptions and frescoes, but surprisingly, he covered them back up. It wasn't until 1748 that real excavations began, and what they found shocked the world to its core. You see, most archaeological sites are just bones, broken walls and empty foundations. But Pompeii? Pompeii was a ghost that still had its skin. Because the ash sealed out oxygen, it prevented decay. Archaeologists found tables set for dinner. They found loaves of bread still in the ovens, charred black but perfectly preserved. They found graffiti on the walls, everything from political slogans to someone complaining about a bad drink at a local bar. It's the closest thing to a time machine we have. But the most haunting part, the part that creates a pull unlike any other site, are the casts. In the 1860s, Giuseppe Fiorelli noticed weird cavities in the hardened ash. He realized these holes were the shapes of bodies that had long since rotted away. He poured plaster into those voids, and when he peeled the ash back, he revealed the final agonizing moments of the victims. You can see a mother holding her child, a man covering his face, and even a dog curled up in a final struggle. It turns archaeology from studying things into meeting people. The insight here is profound. Pompeii shows us that history isn't just about emperors and grand wars. It's about the guy selling fish and the baker who forgot his bread in the oven. It teaches us about the fragility of our own world. One minute you're living your life, and the next, you're a statue for the next 2,000 years. Pompeii was found in a place nobody expected, not because it was far away, but because it was hiding in plain sight, right beneath the vineyards of Italy, waiting for the world to wake it up. Now, leave the deserts and the mountains behind. We're going to the middle of the Pacific Ocean to a tiny island called Pompeii in Micronesia. Here, built right on top of a coral reef, is a city that shouldn't exist. This is Madol. When early European explorers first spotted these massive stone structures rising out of the blue water, they couldn't believe their eyes. It's a network of nearly 100 artificial islets, all connected by a web of canals. That's why people call it the Venice of the Pacific. But unlike Venice, which was built with wood and brick, Madol was built with stone. And not just any stone. We're talking about massive columns of volcanic basalt. The scale of this place is mind-blowing. Archaeologists estimate that the total weight of the stones used to build this city is about 750,000 metric tons. Some of these individual boulders weigh over 50 tons. To put that in perspective, that's heavier than a fully loaded semi-truck. But here is the unexpected part. The people who built this, the Citadel dynasty, had no pulleys. They had no metal tools. They didn't even have the wheel. And yet, they somehow transported these thousands of basalt columns from the other side of the island and stacked them perfectly like giant Lincoln logs to create walls that are 25 feet high. If you ask the local people today how it was done, they won't talk to you about rafts or rollers. They will tell you about the two sorcerer brothers who arrived in a flying canoe. According to legend, these sorcerers used their magic to make the heavy stones fly through the air and settle into place. Of course, modern science looks for a more grounded explanation, but even the best theories, like using massive bamboo rafts during high tide, fall short when you see the sheer precision of the construction. But the mystery doesn't stop with how it was built. It's also about why. Madol was a city of segregation. The elite lived on these man-made islands, isolated from the commoners on the main island. There was no fresh water and no way to grow food on these islets. Everything, every drop of water, every bite of fish or taro, had to be boated in. It was a city designed for pure concentrated power and religious ritual. Why was it found in a place nobody expected? Because who builds a megalithic stone city on a coral reef in the middle of the world's largest ocean? It defies logic. Today, Madol is a silent, haunting place. The canals are choking with mangroves, and the tides slowly wash through the abandoned temples. It's a place that feels heavy with secrets. It reminds us that ancient civilizations didn't just adapt to their environment. Sometimes they completely reimagined what was possible, building monuments to their gods in the middle of the sea. Now, deep in the heart of the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta Mountains in Colombia, there's a place the world didn't even know existed until 1972. It's called Ciudad Perdida, or simply, the lost city. Imagine a city carved into the steep ridges of a mountain 4,000 feet above sea level, completely swallowed by a jungle so thick you could be standing 10 feet away from a stone wall and never see it. For centuries, this was the home of the Tairona people, a civilization that flourished long before the Inca Empire even began. But here's the unexpected part. The world didn't find this city because of a scientific expedition. It was found by tomb raiders, Pharaohs. In the early 70s, a group of treasure hunters followed a series of moss-covered stone steps leading up from a riverbank. They climbed 1,200 steps into the clouds and stumbled upon an architectural marvel. 169 terraces carved into the mountainside, connected by a complex web of tiled roads and circular plazas. For a few years, it was a looter's paradise. Gold figurines and fine pottery began appearing on the black market, which finally alerted the Colombian authorities that something massive was hidden in those woods. But the real insight of Ciudad Perdida isn't just the gold, it's the people who never forgot it. You see, while the rest of the world was shocked by the discovery, the local indigenous tribes, the Kogi, the Wiwa, and the Arhuaco, knew it was there all along. They call it Teyuna. They had been visiting the site quietly for generations to perform ceremonies and keep the spirits of their ancestors happy. Why didn't they tell anyone? Because they knew what happens when the outside world finds a lost city. They wanted to protect the heart of the world from what they call the little brothers. That's us, the modern people, who they believe have lost our connection to nature. Architecturally, Ciudad Perdida is a masterpiece of stability. These terraces aren't just for looks. They were designed to prevent the mountain from washing away during the tropical rains. The drainage systems are so advanced that even after 500 years of neglect and torrential storms, the city is still standing perfectly intact. Today, getting there is an adventure in itself. There are no roads. You have to hike for 4 days through mud, heat, and river crossings just to see it. It creates this incredible pull, a sense that you've truly earned the right to see its secrets. Ciudad Perdida reminds us that discovery is a matter of perspective. Sometimes a city isn't lost, it's just waiting for the right time to be seen again, protected by those who still remember its soul. Now, we're heading to the Soup Valley in Peru. For a long time, everyone thought the oldest civilizations in the Americas were the Olmecs, or maybe the Maya. But in the 1990s, an archaeologist named Ruth Shady found something in a desert coastal strip that shouldn't have been there. It was Caral. Imagine a massive complex of pyramids, circular plazas, and residential buildings that is 5,000 years old. That makes Caral as old as the Great Pyramids of Giza and the ancient cities of Mesopotamia. Before Caral was found, historians believed that the Americas were behind the rest of the world in terms of development. Caral proved we were dead wrong. But here's the unexpected part. Caral is a city built on nothing. Usually ancient cities grow because of two things: grain, like wheat or corn, and war. But in Caral, archaeologists found no traces of corn, and even more shockingly, they found no weapons. No defensive walls, no battlements, and no bodies with signs of violent death. In a world where almost every ancient civilization was built on conquest, Caral seems to have been built on trade and music. Instead of swords, they found 32 flutes made of condor and pelican bones, and 38 cornets made of deer and llama bones. This was a holy city. People from the coast brought fish, and people from the mountains brought cotton and fruit to trade here. The insight of Caral is revolutionary. It suggests that the very first spark of civilization in the New World wasn't ignited by a king wanting to conquer his neighbors, but by people wanting to exchange goods and play music together. Architecturally, they were geniuses of the environment. Caral is located in a high seismic zone, yet its pyramids are still standing. Why? Because they invented shikras. These are woven reed bags filled with large stones placed in the foundations. When an earthquake hits, these bags allow the stones to move slightly, absorbing the shock waves and keeping the structures from collapsing. It's an ancient version of base isolation technology used in modern skyscrapers today. Why was it found in a place nobody expected? Because it's located in a barren, dusty desert valley that looks like the surface of Mars. Nobody thought a grand civilization could thrive in such a harsh environment without a massive river system. Today, walking through the dusty plazas of Caral, you feel a strange sense of peace. It's a city that reminds us that humanity's earliest chapters weren't always written in blood. Sometimes they were written in the harmony of a flute and the cooperative spirit of trade. Now let's travel to the rolling grasslands of modern-day Zimbabwe. Here, rising out of the landscape like a crown of gray granite, is a city that once ruled a vast trading empire. This is Great Zimbabwe. When Europeans first stumbled upon these massive, windowless stone walls in the 19th century, they simply refused to believe what they were seeing. They were so blinded by their own prejudices that they claimed black Africans couldn't possibly have built something so sophisticated. They came up with wild theories, saying it was built by the Phoenicians, the Arabs, or even that it was the site of the legendary King Solomon's mines. But the unexpected truth, which was finally proven by courageous archaeologists in the 20th century, is that Great Zimbabwe was entirely the work of the local Shona people. Built between the 11th and 15th centuries, it was the capital of a kingdom that stretched across what is now Zimbabwe and Mozambique. What makes this city an engineering marvel is the construction. The walls, some of which are 36 feet high and 20 feet thick, were built using a technique called dry stone masonry. That means there's absolutely no mortar, no cement, no mud, holding these millions of granite blocks together. They stay up purely through the sheer weight of the stones and the perfect precision of how they were cut and stacked. If you pull one stone out at the bottom, the whole thing could technically collapse, and yet it's been standing for nearly 1,000 years. The insight here is about global connection. Great Zimbabwe wasn't an isolated fortress. It was a global trade hub. In the ruins, archaeologists found Chinese celadon pottery, Persian glass beads, and gold coins from as far away as Kilwa on the coast. This city was the middleman between the gold mines of the African interior and the merchant ships of the Indian Ocean. The most iconic structure is the Great Enclosure, featuring a massive, solid stone conical tower. We still don't know exactly what it was for. Was it a grain silo, a religious altar, or just a symbol of the king's power? The mystery only adds to the pull of the site. Why was it found in a place nobody expected? Because for a long time, the world ignored the history of the African interior, thinking it was just wilderness. Great Zimbabwe proved that while Europe was in the Middle Ages, Africa was building stone metropolises and participating in a global economy that spanned continents. Today, Great Zimbabwe is the national symbol of the country that bears its name. It's a silent, powerful reminder that greatness isn't reserved for any one part of the world. It grows wherever people have the vision to build something that lasts. When you think of ancient Egypt, your mind probably goes straight to the pyramids or the Valley of the Kings. But there is a city in the Nile Delta that was once so powerful. It was called the Thebes of the North. This is Tanis. For centuries, Tanis was a ghost. It was the capital during the 21st and 22nd dynasties, a time when Egypt was fractured but still incredibly wealthy. But because it was built in the marshy delta, the shifting Nile eventually swallowed it. By the time modern archaeology began, Tanis was nothing more than a series of dusty mounds in a remote, muddy plain. Now here's the unexpected part. Tanis is actually famous in pop culture, but for the wrong reason. If you've seen Indiana Jones' Raiders of the Lost Ark, Tanis is where Indy finds the Ark of the Covenant. But in real life, the discovery made there in 1939 was even more spectacular than a Hollywood movie. While the world was on the brink of World War II, a French archaeologist named Pierre Montet was digging in the mud of Tanis. He stumbled upon something impossible, a cluster of royal tombs that had never been looted. This was a miracle. Almost every royal tomb in Egypt had been robbed in antiquity, but the kings of Tanis were still there, resting in peace. The insight from Tanis changed our understanding of Egyptian wealth. While Tutankhamun is famous for his gold, the kings of Tanis took it a step further. They were buried in coffins made of solid silver. In ancient Egypt, silver was much rarer and more valuable than gold because it had to be imported from places like Greece or Anatolia. Seeing a solid silver sarcophagus shaped like a falcon-headed god is one of the most breathtaking sights in archaeology. But why don't more people know about it? This is the pull of the story. Pierre Montet opened the greatest tomb of the site, the tomb of Pharaoh Susenes, on the exact same day that Germany invaded Poland. The news of the Silver Pharaoh was buried under the headlines of the Great War. Architecturally, Tanis is a giant puzzle. Because stone was scarce in the Delta, the pharaohs literally stole statues and obelisks from older cities like Pyramesis and moved them to Tanis. It's a city built from the recycled glory of the past. Why was it found in a place nobody expected? Because it was hiding in the most inhospitable, swampy corner of Egypt, far away from the traditional tourist paths. Today, Tanis remains a place of quiet mystery. It's a reminder that even the greatest treasures can be eclipsed by the chaos of the present, and that sometimes the most valuable history is hidden not in the sand, but in the mud. Now we are climbing, higher and higher into the Peruvian Andes, where the air gets thin and the clouds wrap around the mountain peaks like a blanket. This is Machu Picchu. For nearly 400 years, this city was a ghost. While the Spanish conquistadors were busy tearing down Inca temples and melting gold in Cusco, they never found this place. It sat just 50 miles away from the capital, hidden by the sheer verticality of the mountains and the aggressive growth of the cloud forest. In 1911, an American historian named Hiram Bingham arrived here, guided by a local farmer. He expected to find a few ruins, but instead he found an entire emerald green city sitting on a narrow ridge between jagged peaks. But here's the unexpected part. Machu Picchu isn't just a collection of houses. It is one of the greatest engineering feats in human history. Most people look at the beautiful stone buildings, but the real masterpiece is underground. About 60% of Machu Picchu's construction is actually foundations and deep drainage systems made of crushed rock and sand. The Inca knew that in a place with 70 inches of rain a year and frequent earthquakes, a city on a cliff should slide away. But it hasn't moved an inch in 500 years. Their insight was building with the mountain, not against it. They used a technique called ashlar masonry, cutting stones so precisely they fit together without mortar. During an earthquake, these stones actually dance. They jiggle in place and then fall back into perfect alignment. It's a building that breathes. The pull of Machu Picchu is also in its mystery. We used to think it was a military fortress or a lost city of the Incas. But now we believe it was a royal estate for the Emperor Pachacuti, a place of spiritual retreat. Why was it found in a place nobody expected? Because it's located on a ridge so steep that even today, the bus ride up the mountain makes your heart skip a beat. It was a secret sanctuary, built by a civilization that worshipped the sun and the mountains as gods. Today, as the mist clears and the sun hits the Intihuatana, the stone that hitches the sun, you realize that Machu Picchu wasn't just a place to live. It was a bridge between the earth and the heavens. Finally, we travel to the heart of the Jordanian desert. To enter the city, you have to walk through the Siq, a narrow, winding gorge with cliffs reaching 600 feet high on either side. It's dark, it's cool, and it feels like you're walking into the earth itself. And then, at the very end of the tunnel, the darkness breaks, and you see it. The treasury, a massive 130-foot tall temple facade, glowing rose-pink in the desert sun, carved directly into the sandstone cliff. For over 1,000 years, Petra was a ghost city, known only to the local Bedouin tribes. To the Western world, it was a myth until 1812, when a Swiss explorer named Johann Ludwig Burckhardt disguised himself as an Arab scholar to sneak into the valley. But here is the unexpected part. Petra wasn't just a beautiful tomb or a movie set for Indiana Jones. It was a high-tech desert metropolis. The Nabateans, who built this place 2,000 years ago, were the water engineers of the ancient world. Think about it. They lived in a place that received only about 4 inches of rain a year. Yet Petra had enough water to support 30,000 people. lush gardens, and even public swimming pools. How? Their insight was a massive, invisible network of terracotta pipes, dams, and cisterns that captured every single drop of rain from the surrounding mountains and channeled it into the city. They literally turned a desert into an oasis. Architecturally, Petra is a miracle of negative space. Unlike most buildings where you add bricks to create a structure, the Nabateans removed the mountain. They started at the top of the cliff and carved their way down. If they made one single mistake, if one stone cracked or a chisel slipped, they couldn't fix it. There was no undo button. Why was it found in a place nobody expected? Because it's hidden inside a natural fortress of rock. It was the ultimate service station for the ancient Silk Road. Caravans filled with frankincense, myrrh, and spices would pay the Nabateans for water and protection, making Petra one of the wealthiest cities on earth. Today, as you look at the thousands of caves and temples carved into the rock, you realize that Petra is more than just archaeology. It's a testament to human defiance. It shows us that even in the harshest, driest, and most impossible environments, we don't just survive. We create art. We carve our names into the very bones of the earth. So, what have we learned from these 9 echoes of the past? Whether it's the high-altitude peaks of the Andes or the coral reefs of the Pacific, humans have always been driven to build the impossible. These cities weren't lost because they failed. They were often just reclaimed by the earth when the world shifted around them. The real takeaway? Our current cities, London, New York, Tokyo, they feel permanent. But so did Troy. So did Petra. History teaches us that the jungle and the sand are very patient. The most exciting part? Archaeologists estimate we've only discovered about 10% of the ruins hidden globally. LiDAR technology is currently clearing forests in seconds, revealing thousands of new structures. The next lost city might be right under our feet. We just haven't looked in the right place yet.